what we're going to be doing today is doing a full motor assembly from completely torn down block, bare block right here with crank out, with everything out, to a full, complete, ready to run 4B11P for my Evo 10. This is going to be like a 6 or 700, I'm going to say a 700 horsepower base full motor. So everything that we are installing in this motor, aftermarket wise, I will link down below. So we're doing the ACL race bearings for the crank and main, ARP head studs, ARP rod bolts, ARP main bolts, mainly I-beam rods, CT pistons. The block we are leaving stock, it is board 20 over, I believe. One other thing you're going to need is the Evo 10 Master gasket kit. So it comes with everything. It comes with the head gasket, valve head gasket, this rear main seal. This is going to be a very, very long video. I'm going to cram everything in one video from how it is now to a full race run motor. So guys, sit back and enjoy the video. I'm going to try to give you as many tips and little tricks here and there as possible. So if you've never built a 4B11 before, or if you just want to sit back and see how a motor is assembled, enjoy the video. Let's get started. The first thing you want to do, as you can see, we have a very, very clean work area. I feel like that's one thing that a lot of people kind of skip out on when building a motor, especially at home like I do, just sitting here in my shop. So try to get a table, throw some shop towels down on the table, get everything clean. Other than that, you're going to want shop towels. I have 2 rolls of these. You're going to want brake cleaner to clean all the parts before assembly. We have the 3-bond 1215 sealant right here that we're going to be using in a few different areas on this motor. A bunch of other towels or shop rags right here you can throw away. What else? Obviously, all the parts to install. So we've got the cradle here, bearings, block, crank, oil pump, rods, pistons. As far as measuring stuff goes, before we throw the motor together, what we need to measure is the rod bearing clearance, the main bearing clearance. On that, I will be using plastic gauge. I know that's kind of frowned upon in the community, but that is what I have to work with, so that's what we're using. I don't have all the specialty tools to properly measure everything out. So we're going to be using plastic gauge. We need to check the piston to wall clearance. We need to set the ring end gap. And I believe, other than that, we should be ready to assemble. We are going to be doing all that stuff first. So checking all the bearing clearances, piston to wall clearance, and setting the ring end gap. Get all that kind of boring stuff out of the way, and then we can start assembling the motor. One more thing you guys will need, I almost forgot, is we have this Wiseco 86.5 millimeter ring compressor. This is how you get the pistons and rings down into the cylinder wall. So you put the piston in here, and it slowly tapers down to 86.5 millimeter, which will allow the rings to compress all the way and get the piston with the rings down into the cylinder wall. So pick one of these up, whatever size you need. This is 86.5. Stock is 86 mil. So if you're doing like drop-ins or something, you'll need 86 mil. You're gonna need a wide variety of tools. The only specialty tools you'll need is a torque wrench. I have this foot-pound torque wrench that goes up to 140 foot-pounds, and then a smaller inch-pound torque wrench, which goes up to 235 inch-pounds. So I'll be using these two, and other than that, it's going to be like regular tools that anyone's going to have in their shop. One thing I want to keep clear with you is the key component to building like a very long-lasting motor is making sure everything is clean. Just start with everything being clean. So I dropped this block, crank, and rods off where we are reusing my older rods, which are the I-beams, mainly I-beams. I dropped all that off at the machine shop, so the crank is polished. We got a fresh bore and hone on the block, along with the head surface being resurfaced. And then obviously the rods are all polished. Rods are good to go there. What went wrong with my old motor was a really bad detonation on cylinder 3, so it took out that piston and the block as well. So this is the new block, or the used new block. All right, let's start with checking the main bearing clearances. So I'm going to flip this around so one is on this side. We shouldn't have to do anything different here. We're just checking them to make sure the machine shop did their job right. Currently installed on here are the ARP 2000 main bolts. So we're going to pull these off. Every single one of these caps is labeled, but when I pull them off, I'm just going to keep them in order how they came off. So 1 through 5, pull them out. Okay, next step is I'm going to clean up all of this right here. Just give the full block a good cleaning. Clean the bore, clean the cylinder walls, clean where the bearings are going to sit, clean the threads with brake cleaner and a Q-tip. Just go through the whole block, make sure it's all perfect and good to go. You guys see why we have to go through the block and clean it? It's not the machinist's job to clean all the holes. Their job is to resurface the gasket area and do all that, the machining work. Look how much metal came out of these head bolt holes. That's why we clean everything up. I'm pretty confident that the block is 100% clean, so I'm going to move on to cleaning up this crankshaft real quick. There are oil, pores, or jellies where every single bearing, right? So make sure you get all this cleaned out as well. Last thing I'm going to do is clean up these crank caps. Make sure you get all the bolts cleaned up as well. Okay, so next up we are going to grab our plastic gauge. This is the green one, it's the smallest one, so it goes from 0.001 to 0.003 inches. Perfect. Just break a little piece off and set it right on top. Now very, very gently take your crank cap and we're going to set it over the plastic gauge, making sure the plastic gauge doesn't fall over. All the caps are on. Now we got to get the main bolts in. I would highly recommend throwing a bit of bolt lube on here. So it's made by Manly. I'm pretty sure it's probably made by somebody else, but it came with the Manly rods. There's still a touch on each bolt. You don't need too much, just a little bit of bolt lube on each one. After we have the plastic gauge in here, be sure not to turn the crank at all, or else it's going to mess up your readings on the plastic gauge. There is a torque sequence when torquing on these mains. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All the inners, and then do the same thing to the outers. We're going to start off by torquing the inside ones to 27 foot-pounds. Now we're going to switch over to the outer ones, and those are going to go to 80 inch-pounds. So I'm grabbing my inch torque wrench. Make sure you follow the OEM torque sequence. Now we're going to go back to the inner ones, the 10 millimeter ones, and those are going to go to 70, the final torque spec of 70 foot-pounds. And then the outer ones are going to go to a final torque spec of 32 foot-pounds. All right, everything is torqued down. Now we can take off and loosen off every single bolt in that same exact sequence, and then pull the crank caps off and measure the plastic gauge based off of this little gauge that is on the plastic gauge package. Now we're going to take our little gauge right here and see what these are measuring at. So a little piece off. This is all on the machine shop, guys. You don't necessarily have to check this, but you might as well. You might as well double check the machine shop's work. Say if it was off, you have to get oversized bearings and then bring it back to the machine shop and have them machine down the crank. But we're all good to go. We need to get all the plastic gauge off of the bearings and the crank. So I'll be using a little bit of brake cleaner and some lint-free towels, get them all cleaned up. Now we're going to have to repeat the same exact process with the rods as well. The rods that we're shooting for 0.0015 to 0.020, I believe. 0.0015 to 0.020. Same exact process. The rod bolts go to, you're supposed to measure the rod bolts with a stretch gauge, but I don't have a stretch gauge. So APR recommends torquing them down to 30 foot-pounds. Once again, utilizing this bolt lubricant. Let me get this cleaned up, and then we can move on to the rods. Remember, every single rod cap you pull off has to go back on that same exact rod. They are machined together. Do not mix them up. I'm going to throw these in the vise real quick and bust them loose because they are pretty tight. When you are installing these rods and caps together, bearing tang, the tang is a little piece of bearing that sticks into the cap. I guess is the best way to explain it. They have to match up. So tang and tang on the rod and cap together, they both match up. And then those are going to face toward me when the flywheel side is over here. The probably doesn't really matter on this motor. I know on Subarus it does. Evos, I don't think it matters, but that's how I'm going to do it for now. Alright, so all the bearing clearances are checked. We're all good to go there. The next thing we're going to do is check the piston to-wall clearance. So we're going to grab this little T-gauge. Once again, this is not the most 100% accurate way, but it is the tools I have, so it's the tools I'm going to use. And we're going to put it down in there. This is measuring at 3.4045. Now on the piston, when you're measuring the piston, you want to go ½ inch up from the bottom of the skirt. So we're going to measure that at... That's right at 3.400000. That is a little bit looser than it should be. The CP spec calls for 3.5 thousandths of an inch. That is 4.5 thousandths of an inch, but 1/1000th of an inch is pretty minuscule. They're going to feel pretty dang loose when you get them in there. These are forged pistons. So the difference between forged and cast, like piston to wall clearance wise, forged are going to be much looser because they expand a lot more than cast pistons do. If it's a cast piston, it'd be like maybe 2/1000ths of an inch. These are 4.5 thousandths of an inch, so it's like double. The clearance, I wish they were a tiny bit tighter. So there may be some very small piston slop when you go to run this thing. Like when the motor's cold, when it warms up, it'll be fine. In all honesty, it's much better to have a loose piston than it is a tight piston. If it's loose, you're going to get some piston slop when it's cold, and that's it. If it is tight, though, it's going to sound fine when it starts, when it's cold. But as soon as it warms up, you're building high horsepower. The piston's going to expand when it gets too